Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful morning. It's sunny here in the Oslo area. My name is Siv. I'm community manager in Enonic. And this morning we will hear from Georg Austad. He's the digital advisor at Norwegian Armed Forces.
So, as Siv said, I'm going to talk about the next generation website, as we call it, for the Norwegian Armed Forces, and some of the aspects of the project. We called the project Forsvaret.no 4.0 because this is the fourth upgrade of the major upgrade of our websites. Of course, we've done smaller iterations through the times, but this is the fourth big upgrade. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the project background, why we started the project, some of the communication and insights with it before the project, some about the team composition, and a little bit about the work method, especially in the design process, and some examples of what we developed. And then I'm finishing up with some strengths and challenges from our perspective about Enonic XP and use of it. And we can take some questions during the presentation, of course. If we have some relevant questions, Siv, you could ask it, but or else we could just gather all the questions and I will answer them in the end of the presentation. So some background information. These are numbers from 2019 when we started the project. Forsvaret.no has about 5 million visitors per year, and we have about 70% mobile traffic. This has increased a lot, especially during the last 5 years, but also during the last few years. At the time in 2019, we had 8 websites with almost 7,000 pages. So it was comprehensive content. And a little bit about our audiences. Our website has multiple audiences that we communicate to. Our primary audiences has been and still is the recruitment audiences. Those are conscripts going to military service or youths that are applicable for education or jobs in the armed forces. And we have other audiences as well: veterans and their families, home guard soldiers, allies, and media. So it's very many different audiences with different needs and also different kind of content. And when we started this project around summer 2019, we already knew, even before we started the insight part of the project. So we knew that some of the content was old and outdated, and some of it was had grown a lot, while other parts of the website was edited often and had updated content. So the quality was very varying through the website. The technical platform which we used at that time was SharePoint 2013, and it was closing up to a need for an update no matter what we did with the content. And the design and user experience was based on a lot of custom front-end coding, which means that some of the design and some of the user experience was actually quite good, but it was hard to maintain, especially for our editors and content creators. We couldn't use developers for updating all our websites. So a lot of different quality as well on the code. So this was a challenge. We had some overarching project goals when we started. We wanted the website to be, and all the content and experience to be credible, relevant, and modern. And we also had a goal that for all our audiences, we wanted the website to be easier to navigate. And there are a number of ways you can achieve that, of course, with fewer clicks or more relevant information, taking away the information that's not so relevant, and emphasizing on the most important, most searched content, etc. So we also wanted the design and communication to be clear. So these are really overarching goals, but when we started the project with the project team, we also said that we wanted to define communication and effect goals for each of our content area and target audience. So when we work with a specific content area, we created and updated the communication goals and effect goals. Now, a little bit about the project insights, and we actually had a pre-project before we started the project with the entire project team, and a little bit about the communication. Now, it was really important for the project board early on in the project, and for me as a project manager to anchor the project, as we call it, to communicate the project goals and the timeline and the frames of the project, and to get a broad understanding on what we are trying to achieve and why we are doing it. This was really important early on in the project, especially for the project board and the project team, of course, but is also important in a large organization, as the Norwegian Armed Forces is, to find the relevant stakeholders and communicate with them early on in a project, to make them understand why we're doing it and to get support from them, because some of them we are dependent on when it comes to resources, and some of them we were not interested in them in meddling into the project on a late stage. So we want them to bring their views on the project and the goals and or at an early stage in a project. So we also made a plan early on for the communication, what kind of platforms and how we were going to communicate with the stakeholders, leaders in different departments, and internal communication, intranet, for example, or through articles or other communication. I had a few presentations of the project during the project as well, but we created a plan of this early on, so we knew that we communicated the goal and the frames and timeline for the project as early as possible. So this was really important for us. We did a lot of insights in this project. We're so lucky at the Norwegian Armed Forces Media Center, where I work. We have our own department that does analytics. They do multiple surveys for where they measure the population's understanding of the Norwegian Armed Forces. We do surveys for targeted to youths, where we see what they think about the Norwegian Armed Forces, what they think about conscription service and our education in the armed forces. So we had some surveys that they did earlier on. We also had some user surveys that were specifically targeting audiences using our website. And of course, we analyzed a lot of statistics that were available, but we also did a few new surveys that we're going to use specifically for this project. We did a web-based survey where we asked users visiting our website about everything from design and user experience, navigation, and how they experience the content and the quality of the content. And we were also able to divide into some demographics and different areas of the content. So we could, the sum of this gave us a really good picture on where the issues were and what actually worked well, because that was also important for us to not try to create something new where we knew things actually worked good. So we wanted to bring with us the things that actually work good and emphasize and work more with the parts that were challenging. So on the previous slide, I also talked about the meetings with the stakeholders. We did it early on, actually, before we even started the project with the project team. Gave all the content owners and stakeholders the possibility to come with some feedback on the previous website, what actually worked with the content, what kind of challenges they had communicating different subjects to their audiences, and if they saw some possibilities in a new platform or new content areas. A little bit about the team composition and the work method. I'm not going into very technical details here, and just some basics. We had a project board where we had the project manager and the product owner, which was me, a project owner from the media center. Some stakeholders we had some stakeholders that were always in the board, and some who just were on certain meetings. And we also have representatives for production of content, which was an editor, design from Tri, and the development team from Bouvet. So the project work group consisted of resources from the media center and a few other departments in the armed forces. We had designers from Tri, and we all had a team leader and advisor, architect, and multiple developers from Bouvet. Yeah. And yeah, this is just a picture from one of the work sessions with the design team. These are the two of the designers from Tri at the left, and the designer from the Armed Forces Media Center at the right. And we also have a picture from, well, actually both left and right is from the workroom that Bouvet gave us the possibility to work in during the entire project. It was a huge advantage, especially at the beginning, because then we actually had the possibility to work together. And I think it was huge advantage, especially when the society got more closed down as it is now, that we worked close together in the start of the project. And when we started working home office from March and outwards, it just the workflow worked pretty good already. So as I said earlier on, through some of the insights we got a good knowledge of where we had challenges in the content and what kind of audiences we had extra challenges with. So we worked with the design sprints for 2 weeks. Mostly, some were a little bit longer, some were shorter, depending on the complexity of the content to the specific audience. But we could take an area where we looked at information about education and to the education applicants audience. We talked to the content owner early on, and then together defined communication goals, effect goals. What do we want to achieve with this content? And then the designers worked out multiple solutions, and together we sometimes even tested, A/B tested, or tested on users the different kind of prototypes they made. And we didn't just make design prototypes; we made it with actual content. So we work with the editors, creating actual updated content based on the communication and effect goals. So we didn't just test the user experience, but also design with actual content. And this is a really rough timeline of the project in general, as I've talked about already. We did a lot of insights before we started with the entire project team in October. And then we did a lot of design prototyping and testing. Actually, the entire visual profile of the armed forces was updated in the initial start of the project. So as you can see, the presentation I'm using now and the design from that is also a part of that visual profile update. So we worked with this all until January, where the development team from Beauvais started fully developing in Enonic. And then we simultaneously worked finishing the design sprints and starting the development sprints with Beauvais. And at the time in January, I think we did even sync up the time we used for the different design sprints and development sprints. So it was even easier to work together. And we can continue with this designing process until about March, and then the designers was basically contributing detail designing and looking at details that we were developing. In about we tried to start with the content already in January. This was a huge challenge because at this point I had about 20 editors and content creators, and I didn't have an editor at the top. We have one website editor at the top, and then we have many editors for each content area. At that time, I didn't have an editor at the top of the system in the Armed Forces Media Center because the position was vacant. So it was difficult to communicate to all different content creators and managing them to actually use enough time to start creating content as early on as possible, because this was a big project, at least for us. So we wanted them to start in January, February, but I think many didn't really start editing and updating and preparing the content for the new website before March, April, and some even in May. Now, after May, we really got to speed up that process, and I think especially because we've come so far in May that we could start building content in Enonic. So we planned with this and with Beauvais in January that we wanted to have a platform that we could start building as early as possible. So we prioritized content that was on prioritized areas and articles or content types that we knew we had a lot of, so we could start creating amounts of the content early on. I'm going to show you just a few examples of what we developed. I could probably talk about this for a while. This is actually an earlier design of the front page. And this is our menu. When we designed the menu, we looked again at the communication and effect goals for different audiences and where we knew we had to prioritize. So our recruitment audience got their own section actually in the menu where they can click in and get all the relevant information. Our secondary audiences are in the center of the navigation with a drop-down menu. And we wanted the menu to be as simple as possible and give the users as few clicks as possible to find the relevant content. But we didn't want to hide too much of the content either. So I think it's a balance between two earlier iterations of the menu that the Armed Forces has used. And so far the feedback is really good. The mobile menu was basically a restacking of the desktop menu, and we didn't want to hide or change anything in the mobile view. Now we built a lot of the content in two different ways. We have a lot of different kinds of articles and article types. We call it articles if it's a heading, title, and some text below it. And we built a lot of the content on the article form. So we have research articles, we have feature long read articles, we have press releases, and we have news articles. We also have many different educational articles about the college education or about the conscription service. So all of these we built with a template where we had some fixed areas in the heading, and for the education or conscript pages we had application date, which kind of branch in the armed forces the service was in, and a few other fixed areas. And then as I tried to visualize on the left page, we had blocks that we could add into the article or content type. So usually we had about 6 to 8 we have about 6 to 8 blocks the editors can use. So they can add a rich text area, fact box, video, it could be an accordion, or an image carousel. And we have reused these blocks a lot, and we wanted to give the editors the most relevant kind of content modules to work with within the template, but not so much that it was hard to choose or difficult to get a good overview of what kind of possibilities you actually have. And this has been a great success from my point of view, especially when I'm tutoring or coursing in publishing, and we can focus on an article and say that and I can learn them what kind of blocks they can use and what kind of possibilities they have using these blocks for creating an article or other kinds of content types based on the article form. So yeah, this is just visualizing how the red part is the fixed areas of the content type, and then the yellow areas is just blocks added from the editor. The other form of building is building with parts. When we started this project, I understood from the architects that not everybody uses blocks and parts exactly how we use it. So that is also part of the reason I'm talking about how we've used the different parts and blocks. All the other pages that weren't general form of article. It could be a landing page or a center page for education, or a job page, or a page for conscripts. We needed a little bit more flexibility. So instead of having a list of 6 to 8 blocks, we have a much longer list of parts with the specific goals and uses. So just like the blocks, we have also the possibility to add as many parts as we want and stack the order as we want, but also using layout to a certain extent, adding parts on the side of each other. We also have a much broader selection of parts that we have made. The one in the center here is a mobile. It's mobile sized video. It is actually mimicking of Instagram stories. So on desktop you can get a larger format of the video. On a mobile you actually get the bubbles just like Instagram, and the user can click on them and swipe through different videos. On the right side we also had accordion that is open. You have 4 different sections, and each section is texted as segmented, and we could add video or images. And we saw that especially for a younger audiences, some of the pages we have, it gets a lot of scrolling, and instead of getting many clicks or a lot of scrolling, we have put some quite a lot of the content in these accordions, and that's why we also put some work into making the accordions as easy to read as possible and easy to edit, of course. This was just a quick preview of some of the parts that we made. I'm going to summarize a little bit about the strengths from our point of view when it comes to using Enonic. It's easy to use, especially as an editor. The feedback from the different content producers has been great, and the user interface is also quite quick. A huge change for us was also that deploying, if it's to a QA system or when we're deploying to the production servers, it goes much faster than we were used to from before. From my experiences, Enonic is also quite flexible. And this last one is actually a quote from 2 our editors and content creators, that building websites in Enonic is actually quite fun. So I didn't expect that when we launched a new content publishing platform. So we don't have we haven't had much challenges with Enonic, but there's 2 things that I miss from Enonic at the time, and it's not possible to limit access to parts. It at least hasn't been from earlier on, and when the users use or create articles and use the block system I talked about, it's quite easy to make them understand the limitations. But when they are building different kinds of pages where they need to use parts, then we have a long list of parts, and for the user it's much easier to learn a few parts and then reuse them instead of learning everything. And especially since as I said, when we started the project, we had about 20 content creators. But at the time, we have about 100, and not all of them need to learn all of the aspects of the web page. That's pointless, because they publish different kinds of content. So, and the last one is if you delete content, it's not completely permanent, but it's not a quick fix to restore it from an editor point of view, at least. So, but all in all, the feedback from using Enonic has been really great. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Georg. Well done, and you're a really solid gang, and what you have done is really solid. So you should be proud of that.
Thanks.
So we have a question, and we will definitely look into the challenges you are facing. And I can see that Torstein is also commenting on that, limiting access to parts. The first question is from Al Shai. Did you reuse code for parts and article blocks? I presume you often have similar blocks parts.
Yeah, good question. Many of the blocks and parts were identical in ways of how we used them and what kind of functionality we wanted. So yes, definitely. We had some changes, but some parts were completely identical with some of the blocks, and some were 90% similar.
Great, thank you. I hope that answered your question, Malin. And Malin is writing, do you mean access for editors or users?
Editors. If we were talking about
I guess,
limiting access to the different parts. When an editor is editing a landing page and want to create a good-looking landing page, and then using the drop-down list from the parts, we have a big website with many different audiences and many different needs. So the list of parts grows and grows, and to 70-80% of the editors, they don't need more than maybe a fifth of that list, because some of the areas are so specific. For instance, we have on the college university, we have a research department, and they just do the research content, and they just need the research content types and research parts. They don't need all the other stuff, and the other way around. So and from earlier experience and in this project, I've seen that when the users edit content, it's much easier to them to just get that short list instead of scrolling through it or trying to search from a long list.
Yes, that would definitely be useful. So hope that answered your question, Malin. And Hanne is asking, how is it to work with language versions of the page in Enonic?
At the time we have English language version, and that part of the website is much smaller. I think it's about 10%, because when I talked about our target audiences, that list is much shorter when it comes to the English website. So we haven't worked as extensively with the English part of it, but it's from our need, it's easy to use the English language version. We haven't worked with the other languages, but in the future it might be relevant, because now we are working with museums and music departments from the armed forces, and they have audiences from many nations. So it might be relevant in the future.
Thank you. Torstein is asking, are you running a design system in the background, or is everything built directly on Enonic?
Good question. I think the designation of design system is different. That was actually something we talked about in the project, because from the designer's point of view, the design system was something different than from the developer's point of view. So if you're asking from a developer point of view, I don't think we have a design system, but our designers definitely have a system of how the different parts and modules work together. So I'm going to lean against a no on that question.
Okay, thanks. Ellen is asking, I heard you mention that you used layouts to some extent. Were there any challenges with using them?
Yeah, we only use one layout actually, and that is the 2 columns. And we tried to define that some parts, when we are coursing and tutoring the new editors, we try to learn them that some of the parts are made and supposed to be used in layouts, but most of them should not be used there. And as you can place parts where you want to in Enonic, the challenge has been that the users get creative if they can, even though you learn them that you're not supposed to do this. So I think the only challenge has been that some users just want to try to be creative in the system and use it a little bit different than you intended. But it hasn't been a huge issue. And when we have tested the parts, we even though they're not supposed to be used there, we did test them in layout just to check if they're working okay. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So our CTO is writing here, Thomas Sigdestad. We're actually working on a part filtering and archiving as we speak. Archiving as opposed to delete. So
yes,
that's good news.
Sounds great.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you, Georg.